allied forces, plus perhaps another 100,000 what are called contractors. These are basically mercenaries, blackwater mercenaries that go around killing people. Then you go to Uzbekistan, there's another base over there. There's one in Kyrgyzstan. Then you have Qatar that acts as the base for U.S. Central Command for the Middle East region. And you have Bahrain, where the U.S. has its 5th Fleet station. And then you have United Arab Emirates, where America has, it uses the white port for its naval operations. And in Oman, you have a British military base, which again is part of the British-American alliance. And if you go further south to Diego Garcia, an island in the Indian Ocean, America has stockpiled thousands of missiles and bunker-busting bombs, including nuclear missiles. And the United States government is saying that just because Iran has put its nuclear facilities deep underground, hundreds of feet underground, and covered them with concrete blocks, etc., or inside mountains, the only way to destroy them is nuclear facilities for peaceful purposes, not for military purposes, but the US says that it is determined to destroy them. So the US says that it will have to use nuclear-armed missiles to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. That is what the United States is saying. Now, it's mind-boggling when you think about it that the US would want to destroy nuclear facilities of Iran that nobody has proved are being used for military purposes or making bombs. Nobody has proved that. In fact, you know, throughout the 80s when Saddam's forces were using chemical weapons against Iran, Iran had chemical weapons, but it refused to use them. I'm going to give you one episode. This was in May of 1985. I had gone to Tehran. At that time, Dr. Kamal Kharazi was the head of the Islamic Republic News Agency. And of course, as you know, journalists contact each other. Of course, Kamal Kharazi later on became the ambassador to the UN, then he was the foreign minister for 10 years or so. I knew him. I arrived at his office in the afternoon, and he had invited myself and another friend of mine, a colleague of mine, for lunch. So we arrived in his office, and what we see is that he's not sitting on his desk. He was sitting on a prayer rug, and he had the copy of the Quran in front of him. So we walked into his office and he said, you know, Dr. Kharazi, what are you doing? Normally, like, you know, Muslims would read the Quran either early in the morning or late at night. Like, afternoon is not, I mean, you can read it at any time, but afternoon is not the sort of normal time to read the Quran, like people are busy with other activities. So he said, you know, what is it that you're doing? And he said that we have a Defense Council meeting tomorrow. Of course, the Defense Council was tasked with formulating military strategy. And we have to make a decision whether Islam permits us to use chemical weapons or not. And I'm studying the Quran to see whether there is any evidence in it or not. This was in 1985. And so I asked him, I said, you know, I used to call him Kamal by his brother, Kamal, what did he fight? He said, well, I haven't come across any evidence in the Quran that would permit us to use chemical weapons, even though we are being attacked with chemical weapons. And you know, Iran did not use chemical weapons against Saddam's regime throughout the 8 Years' War when it had the capability. And Iran's leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has issued a fatwa, an edict, to say that it is forbidden to make nuclear weapons, because these are weapons of mass destruction. See, you know, you may not agree with us. You may not, you know, you may not sort of think that Muslims are rational people. Some of you might not think. I'm sure the rest of you don't think like that. I hope not. But you see, Islam has certain principles, and those who follow Islam's principles follow them very, very carefully. And weapons of mass destruction are forbidden in Islam. Even if we are subjected to them, we are not allowed to use the same weapons against our enemy. So, Ayatollah Khamenei has issued a fatwa to say that Iran is not permitted to make nuclear weapons. Okay, so that's the official legal position of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so when you have the Hamilton Spectator putting up a cartoon like that to say that, you know, Ahmadinejad says that we have to have nuclear weapons, whatever, because we have to defend ourselves, the Hamilton Spectator, obviously, with all due respect, I don't think that they are being, you know, vicious or whatever, but I don't think that they know much about what Islam is about or what the policy of the Islamic Republic of Iran is. But now let's come to the question of if the US or Israel or any of these countries were to attack Iran. Let me tell you something. You know, in December, Iran announced that it had brought down intact one of the drone planes, RQ-170, the most sophisticated plane in America's drone fleet. And they didn't even destroy it. What they did was basically, they incapacitated its navigational system and then fed information into it and brought it down completely undamaged. Iran has in its possession the most advanced drone plane that the United States has produced. That means that Iranian scientists and computer specialists have achieved the breakthrough and the technology to break into American cyber weapons. Now, if the US or Israel or any of their allies were to attack Iran's nuclear facilities, number one, Iran's nuclear facilities are so widespread throughout the country. It's a huge country. They're so widespread that it is impossible to destroy all of them. They can probably be damaged, a few of them, but it's impossible to destroy all of them. But, you know, whenever wars are waged, military planners don't only wage wars on the basis of what damage they can inflict on their enemy, they also take into consideration what damage the enemy can inflict on us in retaliation. Now, Iran has the capacity, and let me paint this scenario for you to give you a clear indication of what is going to happen and what is likely to happen. If the US were to attack Iran or its nuclear facilities, Iran has literally thousands of missiles, thousands of them, not just one or two. Iran has built its own submarines. I'm giving you no secrets. The Iranians admit that. I've seen them myself. Iran has built surface-to-surface missiles. Iran has built surface-to-air missiles. Iran has built air-to-air missiles. And Iran is one of the only Muslim country to put its own satellite into space. The only Muslim country. Okay? If Iran were attacked, I think this is the scenario that I see. Rest assured, American forces in Afghanistan, American forces in Bahrain, American forces in Qatar, America's naval fleet in the Persian Gulf, and the Indian Ocean would come under attack. Iran is definitely going to target oil installations in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, and Iran will make sure that if it is going to go down, the rest of the world will come down with it. There will be not a drop of oil flowing through the Persian Gulf or anywhere in the world. And just consider the scenario. These are no empty threats. Iran is capable of doing this. But you know, regrettably, you have mad people in the White House, mad men and women in the US Congress, and morons in the US Congress who don't understand the implications of what they are saying or what they are doing. And you regrettably have some mad men sitting in Israel as well. They think that they can get away with it. You know, Iran has said that if any missile were to be fired at our nuclear facilities, we have targeted 1,000 missiles at Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor. 1,000 missiles. And they're quite capable of doing this. So I think you can see the scenario that would emerge. Now, Iran is surrounded by 4 countries that are nuclear powers, and the 5th as well, Israel. Pakistan, India, China, and Russia. China and Russia also have interests in the region. They're not going to allow the United States to get away with whatever it wants. You know already the situation, the terrible situation in the US, the economic meltdown as a consequence of the plunder by these executives, by these banksters, by these criminals that have taken trillions of dollars of the US economy. And that's why you have the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street movement. Those who have risen against the 1%, the plunderers, the thieves, the robbers. You know, in the past, the US used to send its armies to other countries to plunder their resources. But in the last 10 years, things have changed. I mean, you know, forget about this baloney about the US wanting to fight Al-Qaeda. I mean, Al-Qaeda was created by the US, for God's sake. I mean, we know that. Okay? The US went into Afghanistan because it wanted to have access to the oil and gas resources in Central Asia. Then they discovered that in Afghanistan, that dirt poor country, I mean, it's, you know, when you see the, you know, I am from that, I was born in that border region bordering Afghanistan, so I'm of the same ethnic stock, I'm a Pashtun, as the people of Afghanistan are. You know, those people are so poor, you really feel sorry for them. But America has discovered that there are vast mineral resources in Afghanistan as well. In fact, there are mineral resources like cadmium, gold, copper, worth $4 trillion in Afghanistan. So America's invasion and occupation of Afghanistan was not because it wanted to fight Al-Qaeda or whatever. I mean, you know, at the beginning of January, Joe Biden had a statement in the Newsweek magazine. He gave an interview. He said, "Oh, the Taliban are not our enemies." You know, really, that's news to us now. I mean, you've been fighting them for 10 years. Now they're not your enemies anymore. You know, we know. You see, the Taliban had never done anything to America. I mean, you know, even the allegation that they made against those, you know, the hijackers of 9/11, there was not a single Afghan in that, not a single Pakistani in that. And yet they went and bombed Afghanistan beyond the Stone Age. I mean, it was already in the Stone Age. You know, just consider this. I feel so sad about this, so upset. You know, the US and its allies have spent $1.2 trillion in waging war in Afghanistan. That's just in Afghanistan. $1.2 trillion. The total population of Afghanistan is 25 million. That means if you take 5 persons per family, that means there are 5 million families in Afghanistan. If, instead of waging war and killing people and turning those people into your enemies, if this $1.2 trillion had been distributed among the 5 million families in Afghanistan, each family in Afghanistan would get $240,000. Imagine the change that would have been brought about in the lives of those poor people. You know, sometimes I wonder why these people cannot even think about these things. Why do they always think that they have to go and wage war against other people, kill other people? You know what they have done in Iraq? You know, brutal as Saddam Hussein was, and I was always opposed to him, but I was opposed to the American invasion and occupation of Iraq, because that's for the people of Iraq to decide, not for the US, not for you and I, not for Canadians or anybody else. Economists have said that the US has spent close to $4 trillion in Iraq on its war over the last 8-9 years. $4 trillion. Now, you know, before the US invasion of Iraq, Iraq had the best health service in the entire Middle East. The best health service over there. It had the best education service in the entire Middle East. After the first Gulf War in 1991, with all those bombings and destruction and everything, the Iraqi regime was able to rebuild its infrastructure, bridges and roads and buildings, etc., within a matter of 1 year. That's the kind of capability that they had. And you know what's the situation today? Iraq's health system has been completely destroyed. Infant mortality has skyrocketed. incidents of leukemia and birth of deformed babies as a consequence of U.S. using depleted uranium shells in Iraq have skyrocketed. These are against the Geneva Convention. The soil of Iraq has been poisoned and it will not be restored. You know what the half-life of uranium is? 4.2 million years. That means that Iraq's soil, Iraq's water have been poisoned forever. Wow. Even Iraqi war veterans are still suffering from the effects of that. Of course, the Americans want to talk about that. And incidentally, we were the first ones. Crescent International magazine was the first one to break the story of the suffering of Iraqi war veterans. When some scientists in the US contacted us, they said, no newspaper in the US is prepared to publish this story. Would you care to do that? We said, sure, we will do that. In 1993, we carried stories by Professor Garth Nicholson and his wife. And then they were dismissed from their jobs in Houston. They were top scientists in Houston when the story appeared. Later on, of course, other newspapers and magazines picked up that story and then they started to talk about the effect of depleted uranium shells on Iraqi war veterans. So I'm painting this picture for you to let you know that those who think that war is the solution to every problem, that they can solve the world's problems by going and invading other people, sending their gunboats or missiles or whatever, I think they're going to get a rude shock. The US is already in the pits. The US is finished as a superpower. It is not going to emerge as a superpower at all. I'm willing to, we Muslims don't bet, but I'm willing to wager $5 a bet. Okay, the US is finished. In fact, if the US wants to wage a war, it will have to go to China to borrow money. So instead of threatening Iran that it has trying to make nuclear weapons, etc., I think it is best for the US, for the sake of the US, forget about Iran, for the sake of the US, to sit down with Iran and discuss and negotiate with the leadership in Iran in earnest. I want to just touch on two other aspects before I conclude. One is, I'm not sure how many of you are aware that there is a 30,000 strong Jewish community in Iran. How many of you knew that? Very good. Certainly some of you know that, okay? Okay. Let me explain to you. In March of 2009, Roger Cohen, who is a Jewish writer, writes for the New York Times, he wrote a column and he said that of course from Tehran, he had visited Iran, and he said that I met members of the Iranian Jewish community and sat with them and discussed their situation in Iran. And to my surprise, they told me that President Ahmadinejad, who is accused of being an anti-Semite and against the Jews and so on, that from his own president's fund, he has contributed several $1 million to build a Jewish community center in Tehran. This is Roger Cohen, if you want to check it, March 13, 2009 of the New York Times. Go and check it. Okay? The Jewish writer is writing. Iran has a Jewish member of parliament. Under the Islamic system, other faith communities, whether they are Jewish community, Christian community, Zoroastrians, they all have their own right to elect their own member of parliament for their faith community, in addition to the member of parliament for the whole constituency. But each faith community has its own member of parliament as well to represent them in parliament. You know, Israel has offered 30,000 pounds sterling to any Jewish Iranian citizen to migrate to Israel. They're not taking up this offer. They would prefer to stay in Iran. And the Jewish community in Iran, although Iran has no diplomatic relations with Israel, it has not prevented the members of the Jewish community to travel to Israel if they want. And they've gone and they've come back. Okay? So the answer to your question as to what happened to the others, some of them of course have gone to Israel. So one of them was the former chief of staff of the Israeli army, who was of Iranian origin, and there are others who have gone into the military. But Iran has not prevented the Jewish community from going and visiting Israel. And in fact, the fact that they're being bribed by Israel to go there and they refuse to accept it is testimony to the fairness with which the Jewish community is dealt with in Iran. So finally, if there were an attack on Iran, and obviously the fact that Israel would be involved in it, the U.S. would be involved in it, it is quite possible that members of the Jewish community might be targeted. Much as we would hate, we would not want that to happen at all. But you cannot control the emotions of the people. You know what happens to the Palestinian people? Somebody throws a stone and the Israelis come and bomb that whole locality. This is common knowledge. So I think it is important that we understand that wars are no longer the solutions to world's problems, that negotiations are. And if U.S. leaders, I wouldn't call them leaders because leaders represent the wishes of the people, they don't. They are rulers, they rule on behalf of their Wall Street bosses and oligarchs. In fact, there is a beautiful book written by Jeffrey Winters, a professor at an American university, called Democracy and Oligarchy in America. Read it and you'll find out exactly what the American system is all about. So, my concluding remarks for you tonight would be that we, as people, as Canadians, if we believe in fairness and justice, if we believe that wars are not the solutions to world's problems, as we have seen in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and the mess that has been created in Pakistan, then I think it is important that we urge all of these governments to stop messing up the world. It has already been messed up enough. I mean, we are virtually on the verge of extinction. We cannot afford more destruction. And if these madmen want to wage wars and to kill more people, they can do so. But I think this time they had better be prepared for some serious blowback. And I hope that that won't happen. Thank you, and may God bless you. Thank you. I'm truly honored. Thank you very much.